Welcome to How to Smoke Your Way to Victory as Viper, presented by Logitech G. At the moment, Viper has some of the best zone control capabilities of all the agents in Valorant, with all of her abilities being different big range, big impact, and big area of effect zone control abilities. Viper is one of the best agents and excels at setting up or denying aggressive pushes and clutching out a post-plant situation on her own. This guide will cover what Viper's strengths and weaknesses are, why you should play her, and teach you how to use her abilities effectively. As mentioned in the introduction, Viper's biggest strengths are her easy-to-use zone control abilities and her clutch potential. All of her abilities are very simple to use, with her grenades having intuitive bounce angles and her smoke walls being very easy and safe to aim. This zone control provides a massive amount of utility to her team, who take advantage and gain a lot of map control with minimal effort. With that much zone control, most Viper players should be able to easily hold sights on every map, choking out enemies with her Snake Bite and Poison Cloud. Furthermore, her ultimate ability is incredible for clutching post-plant situations. It can cover an entire site, forcing enemies to push you blindly and significantly reduce any numbers advantage that the enemies might have. One of the more obvious weaknesses of Viper is the time limit on her smokes. While easy enough to do, it's very important to manage your toxin resource properly, or else your smokes will drop when you're in a vulnerable position. Because of the delay on her abilities, Viper becomes less effective when it comes to solo pushing sites and peeking around corners when compared to duelists like Phoenix and Reyna. Her ulti is best used when she has a few seconds to set up and not take 1v1s. Ultimately, Viper's kit brings a massive amount of utility to any team and opens up a lot of strategic play inaccessible to most other characters. However, because she requires a team that can play around her smokes and coordinate pushes, she becomes less effective in solo play and tends to be underused at this moment in time. Nonetheless, Viper's kit does provide you with a lot of power to outthink and outmaneuver your enemies, even if you are playing on your own. If you're clever with how you use your abilities, you'll be able to control large portions of the map and greatly affect the flow of each round. Viper's ult essentially creates a really large version of your Poison Cloud. When you cast it, the gas cloud expands until it reaches a certain size. It'll stay that size if you stay inside it, but it'll decrease if you leave it. You leave it and re-enter it to keep the spell going, however. It'll last as long as you're there to stay inside it. Be wary of how long it takes for the cloud to form. You often need to plan ahead to use it before enemies can approach you. When an enemy walks inside the Viper's pit, they'll take damage until they reach 1 HP. If they leave the pit, they'll recover the damage they took. More importantly, they'll have their vision reduced and will barely be able to see anything except what's directly in front of them. Viper, on the other hand, will have the advantage of seeing an outline of nearby enemies and not take any poison damage while she's in the pit. When enemies push into the cloud, not only will they struggle to find you, they essentially isolate themselves, allowing you to pick them off one by one. The best use of Viper's ult is for clutching post-plant situations. The size of her ultimate covers an entire site and makes it almost impossible for most enemies to function properly within it. They will almost always be forced to hunt you down when you're in your ult, and they'll always be at a massive disadvantage. Two things you want to keep in mind when you're playing inside your ultimate as Viper. Always shift walk so your enemies won't be able to figure out your position from sound, and try to keep your back towards a wall so you won't get bamboozled by someone sneaking up behind you. One of the more difficult things as Viper is navigating within her ultimate. Since your sight range is reduced as well, it does make things slightly harder for you. One of the best ways to not get lost in Viper's ult is to use the minimap. Always be aware of which direction your enemies will approach from, usually the side entrances, and be aware of which direction you're facing. You can often guess where an enemy will come from doing this, and they'll be walking straight into your crosshair if you do it right. Last but not least, having good audio that lets you guess where enemies are from their footsteps is extremely important for playing inside the Viper's pit. A lot of the time, enemies will be pushed for time and won't have the ability to walk through your ultimate to hunt you. If you're able to use their footsteps to track them, you'll be able to tip the scales in your favor even more. If you're looking for a new headset, try getting something from Logitech G like the Pro X. They're reliable, comfortable, and durable. Viper's most basic ability is her Snake Bite. Simply put, it's just a Molotov that leaves a circular poison pool that deals damage to enemies that step over it. It's a cheap buy, and is large enough to cover a hallway or choke point, so it's often encouraged to just pre-fire a charge to delay a rush. In patch 1.02, Riot made it so that Snake Bite also debuffs its targets, making them take more damage from all sources. This doesn't change too much regarding how you use the ability, but it should be noted, it'll make it easier to spray down people who rush through it. Something important to note is that it's possible for enemies with jumps to bypass the snake bite entirely and avoid its damage. JETT in particular is a good example, but RAZE and OMEN can easily skip it too. If you know an enemy's hiding around a corner, a really good use of snake bite is to bounce it off a wall onto where the enemy is standing. This either nets you a free kill or forces him out into your crosshair. If you hear the enemy reloading around the corner, that's usually the best time to chuck the poison at him. Be aware of your snake bite's deploy time though. You require a second or two for the animation to finish before you can actually toss it out. That's all the time it takes for the enemy to push out and kill you. VIPER'S Poison Cloud is a redeployable smoke grenade. You essentially toss a small object that bounces around, and you press the same ability to deploy the smoke. The object emits the smoke in a sphere around it, consuming your toxic resource. The most basic use of the ability is to block off a choke point or a doorway so that the enemy can't push through it easily. Another good use of Poison Cloud is to try to mask a ninja defuse or discourage enemies from defusing. You can stand inside the Poison Cloud safely, so sometimes it's possible to get a ninja defuse by defusing in the cloud. Alternatively, if you're holding the site in a post plant, you can toss the Poison Cloud on top of the bomb and deploy it whenever you hear an enemy try to defuse. It is very important to note that your Poison Cloud does not kill enemies, it reduces them to 1 HP, and they can recover their HP once they step outside of it. You need to shoot whoever's inside of it to finish them off, so don't get cocky and think it'll deny a defuse fully. Be careful of enemies who spray through smokes randomly. It's a lot easier to die to a random spray than you think. Good opponents will know the right angles to shoot at even if they don't have sight. Because of how the Poison Cloud is deployed, you can actually toss it on top of columns, doors, or boxes to create a one-way smoke. Essentially, it's a smoke where an enemy won't be able to see you through it, but if they push up, you'll be able to see them. These are extremely useful smokes, and essentially make it impossible for an enemy to push past if you're watching it. Doing the one-way smokes requires prior knowledge of where to throw the Poison Clouds. Often, the best way to learn is just looking up these videos on YouTube, checking out resources like the Blitz app, or going into a custom and testing it out yourself. One last thing about this ability, you can actually pick up the smoke emitter. You have to walk up to it and press your interact button, the same button you use to pick up ult orbs. This will be most useful when defending. You can throw the cloud into a main site entryway, then pick it up as you rotate to the other site if the enemy executes there instead. Toxic Screen is VIPER'S bread and butter ability. It's arguably one of the most powerful zone control tools in the game, second maybe only to Sage's barrier wall. Essentially, Toxic Screen's most powerful use is to cut large open areas into half, blocking vision and minimizing the amount of angles an enemy can see you pushing from. The beautiful thing about Toxic Screen is that it has extremely high range and can be shot over walls. Often, you'll want to aim up and cut a site or mid in half using it. Use the minimap to figure out where it will go. You can't reposition your Toxic Screen once you've used it, so here's a couple of notes you ought to know about how to use this ability. Toxic Screen doesn't do damage to your enemies or allies, so don't try and use it for damage. It usually only makes it so you only have to check one angle if you peek, and it'll allow your team to sneak up mid with relative safety. You can use it for a site execute, either to plant or retake, but know that you're basically hard committing to that site if you use it. You could use it to fake the site execute, but that'll work once a game at most. When you deploy the screen, it takes a while for the full screen to take effect. Always wait 1 to 3 seconds before peeking and pushing with it. So here's an example of how to use VIPER'S wall effectively on offense. Even though we're using mid on Ascent as an example, you can extend this to other maps as well. Say your team's play is to try to contest mid. You can peek mid from 2 angles, mid top or mid link. However, no matter where you peek from, you're gonna have to check mid bottom or mid cubby for an enemy, opening yourself up to enemy fire you won't be able to return. So what you want to do here is cut mid in half using your Toxic Screen and make it so that your team only has to look at one of the 2 spots. So when you take the peek from mid top, you don't have to worry about checking 2 angles. You know there's only really one angle the enemy can shoot you from. Because of this, you can slow walk down cat or just rush it down with your team and overwhelm the one guy who will be at mid cubby. If you do it right, he either has to back off or take a difficult fight. The last thing is, make sure you've got a guy watching your back from top mid, because there's no guarantee some crazy person won't push through your wall in an attempt to disrupt your push. When you're defending, you can't just toss down the same wall you do on offense. If you did, you'd be gimping yourself by making it easier for the enemy to isolate your teammate and kill him. Instead, you just want to block off the entryways entirely with your smoke wall. Make it so that if the enemy is pushing, they'll have to push him blind. So when you do a wall like this, if the enemy wants to push, they don't really know where to look or pre-fire, giving whoever's defending a better chance to react faster. Also, because they can't see through the smoke, you can probably sneak into a more unexpected location that the enemy team won't think to check. Another thing you can do is just sit behind cover and wait for the enemy to start pushing, then deploy the wall. You can really throw their push into disarray if you time it right, because what'll happen is you'll cut off half the enemy pushers from each other, and in the second it takes the stragglers to get past the screen, you can shoot and kill the people who've already pushed past. It's important to know that although we've given these specific examples, it's important to play some customs to learn and test out the correct smokes and angles. Blitz.gg has a good video section of these smoke walls as well. Some final notes: the initial toxic screen cast takes a while, especially if you have to aim it. Try to set this up from a safe position, because you're extremely vulnerable when you're casting it. Lastly, be careful of the wall's toxic consumption. If you run out of toxin while you're mid-push, you're probably going to die if there's an enemy on the other side of the wall. As mentioned, a lot of people currently underrate Viper since a lot of her power is best wielded by someone who can work with teammates and really outsmart their enemies. Often, you'll find enemies who just push through your smokes and walls, expecting to surprise you or shoot you in the back, or people try to spray you through them. With Viper, you need to think about how your enemies will react to your smokes and predict their movements. Most players will have certain tendencies, and it's up to you to catch those tendencies and abuse them. Having a teammate or two around you that can watch your back helps immensely. It's a very good feeling when you succeed in outplaying the enemy team with your abilities and really get into their heads. Thank you guys for watching this video. Hopefully, it helped you understand Viper better as an agent and teach you how to better use her. As usual, if you want to see more Valorant content, feel free to comment what kind of videos you would like to see next. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.